Hello, my name is Shyla Matthews, and for my final project, I chose to do it on the movie Smoke Signals. This is just a basic agenda for us today. Now we're going to look at a little summary of what the movie is. This movie was incredible. It is about two friends who go on an adventure to collect Victor, who is the one main character, his late father's remains, and he's on this journey now with his friend Thomas. And Thomas is a good family friend based off of the fact that Albert, Victor's dad, saved him from a burning house fire where his parents were in. So just throughout growing up, Thomas really viewed Albert as this great guy who always was there for him and made him happy. Victor, on the other hand, saw his true father of what he thought, who was an abusive husband and father and a very heavy alcoholic. After much convincing from Thomas, Victor and Thomas go on an adventure on a bus from their Indian reservation all the way to Phoenix, Arizona, where Albert's trailer was, and thus where his remains are. Victor keeps having these flashbacks of his father that aren't very comfortable for him. Thomas also keeps telling stories about how great he thought Albert was. Once they get to the trailer park, or not the trailer park, to Albert's trailer, they find a woman there named Susie who ended up being like a close acquaintance of Albert. She helped him when he was feeling really sick. And she was looking over his stuff while waiting for Victor and Thomas's arrival. At the end, Susie really helps Victor rediscover who his father was and how he really wasn't a bad person. Just a teeny bit more on the film. It is a comedy drama and a coming of age film, and it was actually based off of a screenplay by a man named Sherman Alexie and his short story collection, which is called The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven. Now we're going to look at background information on the director Chris Erie. He was actually an honorary member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. The movie Smoke Signals really set him up for success, and what I thought was really interesting is that there's a quote that he's said about himself is he doesn't aspire to produce films with Indian themes, but to honor Indians and their spirits, which is exemplified throughout this whole film. Context and function. So what I wanted to do for this section is I really wanted to harness your attention on one particular scene is from the bus when Victor and Thomas are on their way to Albert's trailer. So in this scene, we see Thomas and Victor who are riding on this bus, but they're actually having a very deep slash like comedic conversation of how to act like a true Indian. This comes up because Victor is very annoyed with Thomas because Thomas keeps talking about his dad, and Victor is just feeling a lot of remorse and is just trying to get Thomas to understand that like Indians need to be very stoic, otherwise they won't be taken seriously. And this can be shown through just like the facial emotions on each of them. Also, it's really important to pay attention to what the two are wearing. They are wearing modern clothing, but Thomas is wearing a suit, glasses, and his hair is braided. And he does look very out of place on this bus, while Victor is wearing jeans and a plaid long sleeve shirt with his hair down and free, quote unquote. The two are having a conversation about what a real Indian is. The how question we have, I really wanted to focus on the lighting and camera angles. So for lighting, it was very natural throughout the whole scene here. This is because Thomas and Victor are on a bus during the day. At times the lighting is dark, especially when it goes when the camera switches to Victor, who has more brighter lighting, to Thomas, who is in the dark. And to me, I think this conveys the message that Thomas is, quote, in the dark with his knowledge of what an Indian is, while Victor has a very like true view, especially with like that um like knowing how to dress more modernly, I guess. One thing also with the camera angle, there's a lot of up close shots, and this is just because they're having a conversation, and the filmmakers just want us to pay attention to the facial expressions and emotions of the characters. However, I do feel at sometimes Thomas in this scene has a little bit of sunlight on him, which could be viewed as him being very optimistic. And then Victor can kind of be in the dark at some points as well in the scene. And I think that just views his pessimistic outlook on life. Why is this scene the one? I just think it summarizes what modern Indians grow up knowing about their tribes and how much that impacts the way they live their lives. Uh, Thomas knows about his tribe and how they were fishermen, but doesn't really know how to act Indian. His character, like I said before, is just wearing a very nice fitted outfit, and he looks very smart. Thomas, though, seems to be influenced or yeah, Thomas seems to be influenced by the media where he feels like he must look smart or look like a medicine man, as Victor says. And when we look at Victor, he's wearing this modern clothing. It's very casual. Um, and Victor seems to know about the stereotypes about Indians and how they poorly represent what the identity of an Indian is. Thomas has this bigger sense of self. Impact and theme connections. There are quite a few in here, but I chose to focus on one, stereotypes. There's a lot of mention or like sudden inclusions of like the savage Indian, the drunken Indian, or the poor Indian. And to me, these are all very like negative stereotypes. We've got positive stereotypes like noble, wise, or spiritual. Thomas is very spiritual, very into that like storytelling and morals. An example I use here is just anytime Thomas tells an oral story about Victor's dad, I mean, he's using examples of like resisting the vanishing Indian stereotype because he's keeping these stories alive. Next, we have colonialism, and I felt like this was really shown, especially on the bus. There's a scene of a white woman complaining about she was a part of an Olympic gymnastics team, but she never got to compete. And Victor counteracts her and says that she's nothing like an Indian because Indians had to fight for the right, and she did not have to fight because she was privileged. Another course theme I found was identity. Um, yeah, this is just viewed throughout the whole movie. Um, Thomas finds out what it means to be a true Indian in a scene. He changes his clothing from being very nice to normal and casual, and he lets his hair loose. Victor, on the other hand, finds out who the real identity of his father is, despite his alcoholism and abusive traits. He goes through an identity crisis because after being around his father's home, he just feels like he embodies his dad and doesn't want to. My personal understanding of this film, I just felt like this was a really good modern day, expression of what issues that indigenous people go through on reservations. Um, and it tells the importance of family in indigenous culture and how older women are looked to for guidance. Um, I think this film also tried to tell the story of trust and identity in ourselves and in those around us. And I feel like this can be seen through Victor and his relationship with his late father compared to Thomas and his relationship with Victor's late father. Just want to say thank you, and I hope you enjoyed.